Number 1. Hitler was not elected by the German people. Let's set the record straight. Adolf Hitler did not win a democratic election to become the leader of Germany. In fact, the Nazi Party never received a majority vote in any free election. In July 1932, they became the largest party in the Reichstag with 37% of the vote. Impressive, but still a minority. Hitler was appointed Chancellor in January 1933 through a series of political deals orchestrated by conservative elites who believed they could use his popularity while keeping him under control. They underestimated him. Just weeks later, Hitler used the Reichstag fire as a pretext to push through the Enabling Act, which gave him dictatorial powers. Within months, he outlawed all opposition parties, arrested critics, and centralized power in his own hands. So no, Hitler didn't rise to power because the German people chose him. He was handed power by elites who thought they were using him, until it was too late. Number 2. France did fight back, harder than you think. The myth of French surrender often includes phrases like, "they gave up in 6 weeks," or "they didn't even try." But these ideas are misleading. France had one of the largest and most technologically advanced armies in the world in 1940. Their tanks, like the Char B1 and Somme S-35, outclassed most German models in firepower and armor. But the problem wasn't bravery or equipment. It was strategy. France had planned for a repeat of World War I, building the Maginot Line and expecting a slow, trench-based war. Germany, on the other hand, employed blitzkrieg, fast, mechanized warfare that exploited gaps and moved rapidly. The German breakthrough through the Ardennes forest, thought to be impassable, caught the French completely off guard. Still, French soldiers fought bitterly. They lost over 90,000 men in just 6 weeks. Entire towns and regions resisted the occupiers, and after the fall of France, the Free French forces and the resistance continued fighting until the very end of the war. Number 3. The Soviet Union didn't win with bodies alone. There's a common oversimplification that the Soviets just threw endless waves of soldiers at the Nazis until they won. While the Red Army suffered enormous casualties, over 8 million military dead, and more than 20 million total deaths, the idea that they relied solely on numbers is false. After catastrophic defeats in 1941, the Soviet military learned quickly. Under leaders like Georgy Zhukov and Konstantin Rokossovsky, they began implementing more sophisticated strategies, like deep operations, involving coordinated assaults by armor, artillery, and infantry on a massive scale. They also mobilized the Soviet industrial base, relocating factories east of the Ural Mountains and producing staggering numbers of weapons. The T-34 tank became a legend, a machine that was fast, durable, and deadly. At battles like Stalingrad, the Soviets didn't just outlast the Germans. They outmaneuvered them, trapped them, and destroyed them. Numbers played a role, but so did planning, coordination, and resilience. Number 4. The United States didn't defeat Nazi Germany alone. Hollywood often portrays World War II as being won primarily by the United States. While the American contribution was absolutely vital, especially in terms of logistics, technology, and the opening of the Western Front, it's incorrect to suggest the US won the war by itself. When US troops landed in Normandy on D-Day in 1944, the Eastern Front had already been raging for 3 years. The Soviet Union had repelled the German advance at great cost and was pushing steadily westward. Roughly 4 out of every 5 German soldiers killed in the war died on the Eastern Front. The Western Allies were essential in defeating Nazi Germany, particularly in the air war, logistics, and naval power. But the Soviet Red Army did most of the fighting on land. World War II in Europe was won by a coalition, not a single power. Number 5. The Nazi war machine wasn't always superior. The myth of the unstoppable German war machine, precise, efficient, and technologically ahead, is widespread. And yes, Germany made some cutting-edge weapons, the V-2 rocket, the Me-262 jet fighter, and the formidable Tiger tank. But these weapons often came too late, in too few numbers, or with major flaws. The Tiger tank, for instance, was powerful but notoriously prone to mechanical breakdowns and consumed enormous resources. It also required enormous fuel reserves, which Germany lacked. Meanwhile, Allied forces prioritized reliability and quantity. The American Sherman tank wasn't as strong individually, but it could be mass-produced, transported easily, and maintained in the field. Multiple Shermans could swarm and disable a single Tiger. The Soviet T-34 was similarly reliable, cheap, and versatile. In war, it's not just about having the best. It's about having enough of the good, at the right time, in the right place. That's where the Allies excelled. Number 6. Pearl Harbor wasn't a bolt from the blue. The attack on Pearl Harbor is often remembered as a total surprise, an unprovoked strike from a peacetime Japan. But US-Japan relations were already severely strained by 1941. Japan had been at war with China since 1937 and was pursuing aggressive expansion in Southeast Asia. In response, the United States froze Japanese assets and imposed a crippling oil embargo, a move that deeply threatened Japan's military ambitions. Knowing a full-scale war with the US was likely, Japanese planners hoped a surprise attack would knock out the Pacific Fleet long enough to consolidate their territorial gains. Although Japan intended to formally break off diplomatic talks before the attack, delays in delivering the message to Washington meant that when the planes arrived over Pearl Harbor, no declaration had yet been made. This doesn't justify the attack, but it shows that war was looming and both sides knew it. Pearl Harbor wasn't entirely out of nowhere. Number 7. Italy wasn't a total military joke. Benito Mussolini's Italy is often mocked for its military performance in World War II, especially in Greece and North Africa, where early Italian campaigns were disastrous. But while Italy struggled with poor leadership and outdated equipment, its military wasn't entirely ineffective. Italian troops fought in numerous theaters, from the deserts of Libya to the icy fields of the Soviet Union. Some units, like the Folgore paratroopers and the Navy's Decima MAS Commando Unit, earned a reputation for skill and bravery. Italian naval commandos damaged British battleships at Alexandria in a daring underwater attack, and Italian submarines were active throughout the Mediterranean. After the fall of Mussolini in 1943, Italy switched sides, and tens of thousands of Italian soldiers fought against the Nazis in the final years of the war. While Italy's overall performance was uneven, it's far too simplistic to dismiss it as just a comic failure. Number 8. The Holocaust wasn't just the work of a few SS officers. The most horrifying misconception about the Holocaust is that it was solely the responsibility of a small group of fanatics, the SS, the Gestapo, a few evil masterminds at the top. In reality, the genocide of 6 million Jews was a systemic crime involving hundreds of thousands of people. Railway workers scheduled and operated deportation trains. Civil servants tracked Jewish populations and processed confiscated property. Ordinary policemen carried out mass shootings in Eastern Europe. Reserve Police Battalion 101 alone murdered tens of thousands of people. In the occupied territories, local collaborators often participated actively. In countries like Lithuania, Ukraine, Romania, and Croatia, pogroms and massacres were frequently carried out by locals, sometimes even before German forces fully arrived. The Holocaust was a crime of an entire society, not just a few men in black uniforms. Number 9. Britain was not truly alone in 1940. After the fall of France in 1940, it's often said that Britain stood alone against Hitler. And while that's partly true geographically, Britain was far from alone politically and militarily. The British Empire and Commonwealth rallied immediately. Troops, pilots, and resources came from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, South Africa, and more. Over 1.3 million Indian soldiers served during the war, many on the front lines in North Africa and Southeast Asia. Governments in exile from Poland, Norway, Czechoslovakia, and France also continued the fight from British soil. And the Free French under Charles de Gaulle never gave up the cause. Britain had allies, just not many on the European continent at the time. Number 10. the atomic bombs weren't the only reason Japan surrendered. We're taught that the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki forced Japan to surrender, but the full story is more complex. While the bombings were devastating, Japan's leadership was already divided about surrender. Some hoped to negotiate a conditional peace, ideally mediated by the Soviet Union. But on August 8, 1945, just 2 days after Hiroshima, the USSR declared war on Japan and launched a massive invasion of Manchuria. The Soviet offensive crushed Japan's Kwantung Army in days and shocked Tokyo's leadership. With the Soviet Union now attacking from the north and the Americans from the south, the Japanese Empire faced total collapse. The next day, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. The bombings were a major factor, but so was the sudden realization that Japan had no way out. World War II was a war of extremes, industrial, ideological, and human. But it's also a war that we've mythologized for decades. These misconceptions may seem small, but they distort our understanding of how wars are fought, why nations fall, and how easily democracy can be lost. By challenging these myths, we begin to see the war as it really was. Not just a story of heroes and villains, but a complex, brutal, and deeply human conflict. If this video challenged what you thought you knew, share it, hit like, subscribe for more historical deep dives. And remember, history isn't just what happened, it's what we remember, and how honestly we choose to tell it. Thanks for watching.